Breaking news is LSU men's basketball. Matt McMahon with quite the pull. Robert Miller announces his commitment to the LSU Tigers. Bryce Koon alongside Glen West. Glen, initial reaction. This is kind of the big domino that needed to fall. And man, McMahon brought in a nice one.
Yeah, this is absolutely the kind of start that LSU needed to this 2024 class to really make a big push. I mean, we've been waiting, we've been hearing a bunch of names and visits that have been coming in now for several weeks, and they settle in on Robert Miller, a guy who is about 6'10", has all the kind of skill set that you're looking for, the number 56 player in our 24/7 Sports composite ranking. I believe he's the number 2 player in the state of Texas. Just a really phenomenal talent, a guy who can kind of get it done on both ends of the floor. Just watching some highlights and some films of him, moves really well for 6'10". He's a guy that I think is going to be able to affect shots at the rim, which is something LSU has desperately needed in their kind of rehaul here of their program over the first couple of years. I think he's going to be able to help you from an offensive perspective. He's got a sweet jumper, a guy who can kind of affect the paint. Also, he's a great just kind of finisher at the rim. He's got some great speed for a guy that his size. Obviously, the length, being 6'10", is something that doesn't come along all that often with that kind of skill set. He's also a pretty proficient ball handler. He's been kind of working in Texas the last 3 or 4 years with TJ Ford, who's a former NBA player and a guard who had a really long career in the NBA. And they've been really teaching him from an early stage in his career how to handle the ball and be a kind of do-it-all kind of jack of all trades big man. So big time addition for Matt McMahon, and a guy that I think can really help start fueling what LSU hopes to be a really strong effort here in the 2024 class.
Well, this is a big reason that you should have been subscribed to go 24/7 to the board, had some of this content where, an update. And the biggest one was, Glenn, is that he turned down his visits to Alabama and Texas for later on in this month. He visited, the opening football weekend. McMahon and some of the staff was able to kind of shift him around. I mean, you have a guy that our very own Brandon Jenkins with 24/7 Sports recruiting analyst on the hoop side of things. He goes, Miller is a Brandon Miller type of player, which obviously, look, LSU fans saw way too much of that during
Yeah.
his career at Alabama. What is the impact of? You mentioned a little bit of a two-way guy with high upside in this Matt McMahon style of play.
Yeah, the impact is immense. I mean, I think probably the biggest thing that LSU did in just getting this guy on board is that they've proven that they can recruit at this level. I mean, recruiting a
Mm.
top 50 player, a guy who I think has every potential to even outplay his ranking on our service. I mean, and we were just waiting. We were waiting on McMahon to kind of hit it big with some of these prospects they've been bringing in. You go back to that Grambling game, they brought in not only Miller, but they brought in Victorious Miller. They brought in another extremely talented guard in Billy Richmond, who's a 5-star. We've been accumulating these 5 stars, getting these 5 and 4-star talents, these top 60, 70 players on campus the last couple weeks. You'll have 4 more on campus this weekend for the Arkansas game. But just to add a little context, this is just to get him on board, just to get somebody who is going to be a kind of dynamic weapon for you to use on both ends of the floor, I think was just extremely, extremely important. Now you can kind of lean into him as one of your top recruits, get him on the phone with other guys, get him buzzing about LSU basketball again. I was always of the opinion here that I thought LSU kind of needed to prove it on the floor first. I think a lot of people kind of around the program were excited and hoping that they could get somebody of this caliber before this season started, and they absolutely hit on a guy who has some Louisiana background. His dad played at LSU for a few years in football. His mom played basketball right down the road at Tulane and was a WNBA player. So he's got some athletic genes to him, and he's absolutely capitalized on him so far in his high school career. We'll see if McMahon and LSU are able to tap into that potential and have him be a huge piece here for the future. But the impact is immense in terms of just the way this program is viewed now. I think you can start to change the tide a little bit now that you have one of these top 50, 60 recruits on
Mm.
board. See if you can't go out there and grab another one or two of them. McMahon wants to build this thing up from the freshman class. Don't want to have to be dipping into the portal for 6, 7 guys every year. And so this is a really good start, I think, for LSU fans, and certainly for Matt McMahon here as he gets started on his second recruiting cycle with Robert Miller.
Want to add this too as we kind of get ready to wrap it up here. You mentioned about would they have to show it on the floor first? I think that this proves that LSU is still a brand to be reckoned with on the recruiting trail, even without the on-court success. I mean, Glenn, you had to cover it each and every single night. At times, it wasn't pretty last year, and so for them to be able to nab this recruit and be able to say, "Hey, look, we really haven't proven a lot here, but man, behind closed doors, the pitch of what you can be and how you can help this program. What kind of doors does this open for the rest of those guys that you mentioned? And I mean, just gut feeling. Do you think this could lead to more dominoes falling?
I mean, we'll see. I do think that it absolutely could. The you mentioned the brand. I think what you're watching with women's basketball and with baseball and gymnastics is always seemingly bringing in some elite talent every year. Certainly, football has done a nice job here under Brian Kelly the first couple of years. It's a brand, and it's something that they've really leaned into. I think just kind of going back to the men's basketball side of things and really looking at it from that lens, it's been very interesting that Matt McMahon has kind of retooled his thinking. I mean, this last offseason, he attacked a lot of players in the portal that had Louisiana backgrounds. Corey Chest, who's their highest signed freshman, is a Louisiana guy, and I know he played his senior year, I think, in Missouri or something this last year. But he's a guy that has grew up in Louisiana, grew up watching LSU. I think that Louisiana ties element to all this is really interesting to kind of look at from a basketball perspective, because you look at basketball in Louisiana, and a lot of those top end recruits wind up playing football or they wind up playing another sport. And so I think the fact that LSU was able to bring in a kid who obviously lives in Texas but has a lot of Louisiana ties, family ties, and continuing to build that brand of we want guys who are going to represent the program, represent the brand, represent LSU the right way. I think this is a home run hire or home run hit for LSU on the recruiting cycle, and we'll see if he can't have an effect on some of these other players that LSU has been bringing in here over the last couple of weeks, because it doesn't take much to get a recruiting domino started. And I think
Mm.
once, some guys see that one guy is on board, it might lead to a trickle down effect. You just never know. And I think that's kind of the position LSU is hoping to work from. And we'll see certainly how this weekend goes with another crop of really talented high school prospects that are going to be on campus. So, we'll get a good look at Nicholas Cody, several other guys who are going to be on campus as well. And I think it's going to be a really exciting time for men's basketball here before the season starts.
Man, it's so much easier to recruit when you have a guy like this sitting in your treasure chest already that you can show off to other guys
Yeah.
that are making visits as well. But hey, Glen West with some great, obviously, insight on this situation. And look, if you haven't already, this is the first you're hearing about this, head over to Go 24/7. We're going to have some great content dedicated to, obviously, Robert Miller committing to LSU and Matt McMahon, a really big boost for this LSU program that, man, they needed. They needed
Yeah.
it. We talked about it
And look,
here big
I
time.
didn't really put this out there on the onset, but I was able to, talk with his longtime coach, TJ Ford, who's been, I mentioned here a little bit, but he's a guy that he's a no BS kind of coach. I think he's a
Mm.
kind of guy that is going to get the most out of his players that he's been recruiting and bringing up over the last several years. Robert Miller is a guy who I think LSU is going to be uh, really in tune with in terms of his skill set, and kind of have a really good plan for him. Ford said that they've worked really religiously about making him kind of a guard forward kind of guy, and somebody who I think can, obviously attack the lane, but also step out and affect the game on the perimeter, and then certainly defensively be able to move his feet and affect shots at the rim. I think this is a really complete player that LSU is going to be getting, and someone that I think can contribute next year at a pretty early stage in the season.
It's going to be nice. It's going to be nice to watch, and LSU trying to continue that momentum on the recruiting trail. Bryce Koon alongside Glen West. We got updates everywhere: basketball, baseball during the spring, and obviously football here during the middle of the season because we got a game tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. Arkansas coming to town, and like you mentioned, some big time recruits as well. So stay tuned to the YouTube page for all great coverage. We'll have an instant reaction video. We'll obviously continue to monitor the situations, but the best way to do it is to head over to Go 24/7. Get that VIP subscription. Sonny said it earlier this week on the recruiting podcast. There's not a deal right now, but just help feed Bryce. That's what he said. So I guess that's the sense. Help feed Glenn and I, and man, we'll deliver on some content as well. We'll catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.